Welcome back to Chat Shit. It is the last week of September. I cannot stop talking about the grand final that's coming up, and I can't wait to talk about it with you now. Let us know your thoughts for this grand final in the comments. Aiden.
This grand final marks a 125-year rematch of sorts, as the last time the Swans and Lions faced off for the flag. It was in the 1899 VFL Grand Final, and back then both clubs were based in Victoria, as South Melbourne and Fitzroy respectively. Swans are trying to win their 6th VAFL Premiership and their 3rd since relocating to Sydney, joining their 2005 and 2012 triumphs. The Lions are hoping to claim their 4th VAFL Premiership since the merger of Brisbane and Fitzroy 28 years ago, adding to their three-peat 2001, 2002, 2003 crowns. It's the first time since 2006 that the grand final does not involve a Victorian team.
Let me tell you some storylines for this grand final. These are the losers of the last 2 grand finals, both looking for redemption. Swans with a big loss to Geelong in 2022, and Brisbane with an excruciatingly close loss to Collingwood last year. They're both back, and one of them's going to win it. One of them is going to have 2 absolute heartbreaks in a few years or a couple of years. Brisbane, they were 0-4 to start this year. Especially with all of the talk the last few years about grand final hangovers and that sort of thing, looked dead and buried, and they've charged into the grand final, making it from outside the top 4, having to go the hard way. Luke Parker, the first ever Swan to play in 5 grand finals when he steps on the field this week. How incredible is that when you look at Luke Parker's legacy? Is he going to be 1-4 or is he going to be 2-3? Let's talk about Isaac Heeney. Controversially ruled out of Brownlow medal contention when he was the favourite at the time, but now has the opportunity to get a medal that will mean presumably a lot more to him in a premiership medal. And he could very well add the Norm Smith to that. And then I want to talk about the superstar on the other side, Lachie Neale, 2-time Brownlow medalist, and now 3-time grand finalist, going back to being the sub in 2013 for Fremantle. He was the 58th pick in the 2011 AFL draft. This was a guy who, when you compare him to the elite midfielders of a generation, you talk about those real guys like your Petrarcas and Olivers and Bontempellis, your Judds and Ablets and Dusty Martins. These are sort of guys who had some crazy athletic traits. Lachie Neale never had that. He had footy smarts, a work rate, an engine, and toughness. And that all allowed him to build his skills to become pretty much the most skillful midfielder in the competition. Nick Dacos is challenging him for that now, but Lachie Neale, the way he can find a hand pass to a teammate every time in severe congestion, it's second to none, and he deserves any accolades he gets.
I mean, he's not the biggest, he's not the quickest, but he's still built an almighty career. As Lachie Neale is 3rd favourite in a Brownlow this year, which he's probably just going to fall short of. But again, he wasn't far off winning 3 Brownlow medals.
Then we're talking about a guy who's super experienced, like Lachie Neale, has got a lot of accolades already. Let's talk on the other end, just a final storyline for you. Errol Goulden and Braden Campbell. Great representation of the young guns of this Swans team. Played together since they were little kids in the Swans Academy, and now they'll be walking together into a grand final if Braden Campbell makes the cut. And that's such a special thing to think about. These just 2 kids from Sydney, not even from Melbourne, just playing some footy together when they were 8-9 years old, and now they'll be playing a grand final together.
I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? You grow up with your mates, you stay at the exact same team, and now you're playing in the biggest game of the country. Yeah,
it could have been us if I didn't do my knee when we were 11 years old.
Ankle, gone, and all sorts. But yeah, let's talk about how the teams are going to win the grand final. So where is Sydney going to win it? Where are Brisbane going to win it? Obviously, the big story is Oscar McInerney's going to miss this game. Now, we did see Grundy as potentially was the worst on ground for the Swans in the game against Port Adelaide. He was comfortably beaten by Sweet. Didn't have a lot of impact. Didn't get back, take many marks. Wasn't involved in the handball chains. So where do we see this rock battle? Because that's got to give Grundy confidence.
Yeah, I think it's very important for the Swans that Oscar McInerney's out, because I think he would have had his way with Brodie Grundy. Brodie Grundy, you can tell his body's a bit torn up by the end of the season. He's an older player, a ruckman already. Those are things that make it very hard for you to be performing by grand final day. So I don't think Brodie Grundy will dominate a Darcy Fort or a Henry Smith or a Joe Danaher. I think it'll be a pretty even battle. But it's better than Grundy being dominated by Big O.
And another thing, the Swans really struggled in the clearance against Port Adelaide, and they're coming up against an even mightier side at clearance in Brisbane. I think that's going to be a massive part of the game because we know Brisbane's scoring power from centre bounce, and if the Swans can't take a hold of that, I think that could hugely influence this game.
You'd have to assume that the biggest focus of the Swans' game-specific training will be the clearance, because that was the one place where we really didn't dominate, especially in the first half. We spoke last video about how the Swans turned it around in the second half, but got dominated 26 clearances to 9 in the first half by Port Adelaide. That can't be the case because against Brisbane, because we were lucky that Port didn't enter 50 well, did not transition well, didn't defend too well. That's not going to be the case with Brisbane. They're strong everywhere. We can't expect to dominate enough in transition that we can give up a big clearance differential.
And another thing, these two teams are teams that love to open up the ground and get those handball chains going and run straight through the corridor. They're not teams like Port Adelaide that like to make it a scrap. So this game's going to be end to end. There's going to be teams on their feet at the end of quarters. It's going to be a lot of run back and forth. It's going to be highly, highly entertaining.
Yep, I want to talk about the taggers because when a game's open like that, which it might be, those really talented players can just have a huge influence and can be the difference in the game. We know that the Swans love to tag. We'll play two hard taggers in one game. We'll chuck James Jordan on your best half-back flanker, and we'll put James Rowbottom to your best midfielder. And that's going to be the case. Rowbottom's going to go to Lachie Neale, and James Jordan is going to be at Dane Zorko's hip for the entire match. He'll go off when Dane Zorko goes off. He'll come on when he goes on. Brisbane and Chris Fagan are known not to tag this year. Jared Berry's not done too much tagging in the back half of the year. Do you think, given Heeney's sort of godlike form at the moment, they have to change that up and stick someone to him?
Well, we saw Drew tried it, and Drew's quite a recognised tagger. He's good. He's got the job and done the job on several high-ranking midfielders this year. But Heeney absolutely destroyed him. He beat the tag. So I don't think they're going to try and all of a sudden tag Heeney to try and quell his influence. Maybe they send Berry to him at stoppage. But around the ground, I think they're just going to back themselves to win the ball on the ground and just try and keep it and keep the ball away from them. Another thing that's big in this game is both teams like the uncontested mark game. And a big thing we've seen is when Brisbane take more than 100 uncontested marks in a game, they win. When they take less, they've got about a 30% win rate. So
if the Swans can lock down the chipping game, which is how Brisbane love to open you up, they love to build, they're patient, they just love to work it around the field and not rush. If the Swans can really have a high press and quell that, it'll go a long way to stopping the Brisbane playing the way that they want to play. Force them long.
Absolutely, and we know in finals the stars are going to step up and the people that are most important to your team. So we're going to jump into the 10 most important players of this grand final.
I think the 10th most important player on grand final day, it's going to be Darcy Wilmot, and I have a very specific reason for this. Dane Zorko, I think there's a very good chance he gets hard tagged, well, like we just talked about. And if Brisbane want to play their way and move the ball from the back half forward, Darcy Wilmot's going to have a big part to play. He's going to have to be quality. He's going to have to get his hands on the footy because I think Dane Zorko, they're not going to get their usual output from him with James Jordan at his hip.
I like it. But speaking of Dane Zorko, I've gone James Jordan as the 10th most important player. I think he's done a job on several halfbacks this year. There's a very, very, very good chance he goes to Zorko and sticks to him the entire game. I think if he can get the job done on Zorko and take away their prime mover out of the back half, it's going to go a long way for this one's winning this game.
Yep. Similar sort of wavelength to me there. At number 9, I've got Errol Goulden. You talk about ball movers, Errol Goulden's arguably the best. He's the purest left foot going around, and in a game like the grand final where pressure's going to be at an absolute peak, energy's going to be at an absolute peak, to find some composure and some quality in all the midst of that, Errol Goulden's got the best chance to do that, and he could really just be the difference in the game. He's that sort of player.
I like it. I didn't have him in my top 10. I guess it's only 10 names across the 36 players on the ground. At number 9, I had Zorko. Now, some people might put him a bit higher, especially probably as one of Brisbane's best players, All-Australian. But I think just because he's going to cop the tag, and I think he is going to struggle, even though he's had a very impressive final series, I don't think he's going to have the most impact on this game. But I think for Brisbane, it's important that he can fight his way through that. In the past, Peatland kicked 2 goals on him, and then he he went forward and he had an impact. I think he's probably going to have to do something similar here, but he can't let Jordan get him going the other way. And he's going to have to find a way to impact the game.
Yep. I like it. And number 8, I've gone with Josh Dunkley. And my reason for that is I think he's been sort of below his best. He's been solid as a midfielder, but especially in the back half of the year, I think it's sort of been hidden in the shadows of the fact that Brisbane have been so good. Josh Dunkley's been a little bit below his best. When Lachie Neale hasn't performed, their midfield's sort of been dominated because I don't think Josh Dunkley's really had that clearance, tackling, energetic dominance that he has had, especially when he was at the Bulldogs in his first year at Brisbane. I think he's really going to have to stand up because that midfield battle is going to be ferocious and he can't disappear this game. I think he's going to have a big one.
I like it. He just missed out on my 10. Number 8, I've got Brandon Starcevich. And I like that we're having a lot of different names. It just shows how hotly contested the game's going to be. And simply, all I've got in here, it's a really small one. He's going to have the job on Papley.
He is. What a matchup that's going to be. But I think Starcevich is unfortunately a very likeable guy, so I don't know how much Papley can do to him to rile him up.
100%. and I'm going to talk about Papley a little bit later. And if Starcevich can get the job done, it goes a long way with the rest of the Swans forward line.
Yep. Speaking of Papley, speaking of small forward game changers, at number 7, I've got Cam Rayner. Now, we know that he has been at pretty much his worst in this final series and he's been at his absolute best. And we can see the difference, the tangible difference that can have on Brisbane's performance and their scoring power. Cam Rayner, he was a number 1 pick for a reason. He is explosive. He can change the game like that. Is he going to do that in the grand final? It'll be really interesting to see because I have no clue who the Swans are going to put on him. Brisbane have so many small forwards that are dangerous. Don't know what the Swans are going to do. So Cam Rayner could have a big influence.
100%. I had Cam Rayner at number 7 as well.
Yeah.
And I just said he can rip the game apart if he plays like he did in the second half of last time. And the last time the Swans and the Lions met in that ripping game when they played each other and it was really close at the end, Cam Rayner really stood out in that game.
He did. And number 6, I've got Tom Papley. The firecracker. I've been really happy to hear some analysis from Melbourne media talking about how he's not just an energizer and a celebrator. He might be the best small forward in the competition. He is absolute quality, along with energy and effort, and that is exactly what you want for a grand final. I think he's built for it. He will be as disappointed as anyone about 2022, and I think he's going to have a huge game.
I like it. I'll add my notes in just a second when I get to him. But number 6, I got Nick Blakey. Now, we needed a big game from Nick Blakey against Port. We got it. We got a very good first half from Nick Blakey. And all I've got here, I've got 3 words. Creation, defence, influence. And I think he excelled at all of them against Port Adelaide. The way that he can just take the ball and break lines, and he plays quickly, which is going to be hugely important for this game. But he can also go back and take a contested mark. He's going to have a job on one of the small forwards probably. He'd be one that I could potentially look at going to Cam Rayner when he's sitting in the forward line. But yeah, it's going to be important for Blakey to get going here.
I will talk about Nick Blakey in a second, but at number 5, I've got Joe Daniher. We don't know exactly what role he's going to play, but as we've spoken about, he is, as it goes, a relatively inconsistent player. He's been consistent this season compared to other seasons, but still, he's known to disappear and he's known to kick inaccurately sometimes. That's not going to be allowed for Brisbane here if they want to win it. Brisbane have been one of the most inaccurate teams in the league. Joe Daniher has had a part to play in that. He's going to have to be accurate and he's going to have to be on song for Brisbane to win it. It's going to be a really fun matchup. Him versus, I think Melican and McCartan might rotate because it's a big job on Daniher. He works up the ground. He's on the wing sometimes. But he is a crazy talent and can do crazy things.
I like it. I didn't have 50-50 from anywhere on my list. At number 5, I have Tom Papley. And one of the key reasons is if they're down, and there's a chance that they do go down, a Papley goal can get them going. Yep. And you just sort of need that in the grand final because pressure can build. If they go down by 2 or 3 goals, a Papley goal, and he runs through Starcevich, can really build the team's momentum. Also, with the quality of the Brisbane defence, and Harris Andrews isn't going to let any of the Swans forwards take marks. Payne's going to have a lockdown job with one of the Swans forwards. The ball's going to be coming to ground a lot.
Yep.
And being the Swans' best small forward, arguably the competition, like you said, best small forward, he's going to have a lot of work to do on the ground.
He is. At number 4, I've got Nick Blakey, who you've already talked about. And everything you said, right? The creativity, the speed, the ability to break lines. I want to add to that. Oh, you spoke about defense too. Just in this game specifically, we've talked so much about the Brisbane forward half pieces. Blakey's going to he's going to be held very, very accountable. He's not going to be able to roam free. He's going to have a big defensive job. And so it's going to be very difficult for him to get away and get his freedom when we have the ball. So if you can find that balance properly, that'll go a huge way for the Swans.
I like it. At number 4, I have Lachie Neale. Now, you could argue he's Brisbane's best player. And I don't know if he's going to cop a hard tag, but I think knowing John Longmire, he's going to pick him up at every single stoppage. And with Zorko likely getting the hard tag from Jordan, it's so important that this guy gets going.
Yep.
He needs to have 25 plus touches in this game, especially with the lack of Zorko's influence that we're assuming Zorko's not going to have. He needs to get going. He needs to be kicking the ball forward. He needs to be finding targets. He needs to find some space. He can't let, if it is Rowbottom that goes to him, he can't let Rowbottom get all over him and beat him up at stoppage. So yeah, it's really important for Brisbane that this guy gets going.
Yep, agreed. At number 3, I've gone Chad Warner. The first thing and only thing I really want to say was 2022 Grand Final. Chad Warner was the only Swans player that could really hold their heads up high knowing that they played a Grand Final worthy performance. He had 3 goals and 25 in a game where we barely got the ball in the forward 53 times. So he's shown that he is a man for the big moment. He's not just a showstopper in the dead games in the middle of the season. He's going to do it in the big moments. And if he can do that again against Brisbane, we know he has attributes that no one else in the league has. His change of direction, his ability to just back himself, weave between players, boot it from 60, just drill it. Like, he does things no one else does, and it's going to be huge in the Grand Final.
100%. Could not agree more. I've Chad Warner at number 3.
Yep.
All I've written here is 2022 Grand Final, made for the big stage, one of the highest rated players on the ground in a dominant Geelong performance.
Yeah. And he was the highest rated player on the ground in the prelim just then. So in pretty much the 2 biggest games of his career so far, he's been the best player for the Swans in both games.
100%.
Number 2, I've gone Lachie Neale, who you already touched on. There's not really a lot that needs to be said. He's the reigning Brownlow medalist, the 2-time, one of the best in the league, and he's going to be as important as anyone for Brisbane.
100%. And number 2, I have Harris Andrews. So an inconsistent Swans forward line, rebounding quickly off halfback. I think he's probably gonna have the job on one of the big 3 key forwards from the Swans. There's a very good chance he gets the job done, and we can't allow him to have his own game and run around in the defensive 50 and make every contest, bring the ball to ground, take 7 or 8 intercept marks and really dominate the game. But I think he's probably going to do that, just knowing Harris Andrews and his quality and what he's done in the last 5-6 weeks, in the whole season for that matter. I think he should have been All-Australian, and I think someone's going to have a big job at quelling his influence.
Yep. Now let's say our number 1 on 3. 3, 2, 1, Logan Morris.
Yeah, I knew that was coming from you. I just didn't want to engage.
So, number 1, Isaac Heeney.
Yeah.
He is, as we've spoken about today, he's the best player in the league, and there's quite a big margin now. It's seriously scary what he does. Do you want to talk a bit about it?
I don't think there's any perfect matchup for Isaac Heeney, and with Brisbane not tagging you, if they choose to tag, he'll take you somewhere and he'll beat you in a one-on-one contest. He's looking down the barrel of what I believe will be a finals MVP, and I think he'll get off the chain on this final.
Yeah, I heard a pundit put it really perfectly. He said, Isaac Heeney feels like He-Man right now. He seriously feels invincible. There's no part of the ground where he's not going to dominate, and there's no, as you say, there's no matchup that can go against him. If you put a tall on him, he's going to be too agile in the air, getting to the ball first, and if you put a small on him, he's going to be too strong in the air. So what can you do? Nothing. You're going to have to chuck 2 blokes to him probably, and that's just going to leave you weak somewhere else, but you're going to have to compromise somewhere.
Now, this game is very 50-50. We're not really sure who's going to win it.
I'll speak for yourself.
But we're going to try and predict it now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start us off. Based on everything we've said, based on a little bit of bias, I'm going to tip the Swans to win this game, and I think it's going to be close. I've got the Swans by just 9 points.
See, I really, really like the Swans. But I don't want to jinx it, so I'll tip, nope, Swans by 42. I think, okay, can I say, all these guys tipped either Port Adelaide or Swans by a very small margin last game. I said we'd get away from Port. I said we'd beat them by about 49. I was the closest.
You were.
I think we're too good for Brisbane. They've had back-to-back really, really taxing games. The Swans have played basically half a game in 2 weeks. That Port game was pretty chill. Swans get it done, 42 points.
I like it.
Give me
I
your
like
first
it.
goal scorer as well. Let's just throw that in there.
My first goal scorer, I think Brisbane are going to win the clearance, and I think Zach Bailey kicks the first goal in the grand final.
He's that kind of guy, isn't
Yeah.
he? I'm going to give me Luke Parker in his 5th grand final, first ever Swan to do it, and he'll start it off with a bang.
I like it. When this video released, the grand final is going to be tomorrow. And we'll do a review regardless of what happens. You'll either be very happy Swans fans or very disappointed Swans fans, and you may not even see a video.
And Aiden will have a top hat edited on him right now. Thanks for watching.